There is a moment that comes before the decision, not the moment of deciding, the moment before it, the one where you are still pretending you haven't already decided, where you are going through the motions of considering it, turning it over, examining it from the angles that responsible adults are supposed to examine things from, the practical angles, the logical ones, the ones that ask whether this makes sense and whether the timing is right and whether there is a good enough reason that could be explained to someone else in clear, defensible terms. I was in that moment for about 40 minutes. Then I stopped pretending and started packing. I don't know exactly when missing someone crosses the line from feeling into necessity. I think the line is different for everyone. And I think most people never cross it, or cross it so rarely that it remains remarkable when it happens. Most people feel the missing and carry it and manage it and redirect themselves toward the next thing and the next thing after that, and the missing becomes part of the background, one note in the ambient sound of a life that has learned to function in the presence of absence. I had been doing that, managing it, functioning in the presence of it, going through my days with the particular competence of someone who knows how to keep moving even when something in him is stopped, who has learned to separate the outward continuity of a life from whatever is happening in the interior of it. I was fine. Externally, functionally, by every visible measure, I was fine, but fine is a managed state, and management requires effort. And the effort at some point in the middle of an ordinary evening that looked exactly like all the ordinary evenings before it became more than I was willing to keep spending. I missed her. Not the ambient missing that had been running in the background for days, something sharper than that. Something that arrived without warning in the middle of the evening and refused to be redirected or managed or placed in the background where it had been living. It arrived and it stayed, and it looked at all the usual strategies and was unimpressed by all of them and kept saying the same thing regardless of what I tried to put between me and it. Go to her. Not go to her eventually. Not make plans to go to her when the timing is better and the logistics are cleaner and there is a reason that makes sense in the daylight. Go to her now. Tonight. Get in the car, find a flight, or do whatever the distance requires and close it. Stop living on the wrong side of the distance from the person your heart is already with. The thing about that particular voice, the one that says the true thing, the specific and inconvenient and logistically complicated true thing, is that it doesn't get louder when you ignore it. It just gets clearer, more patient, more willing to wait while you exhaust all your other options, and knows it's right and it's not in a hurry because it knows that eventually you'll exhaust the alternatives and come back to it, and it will still be there saying the same thing it was saying at the beginning. Go to her. I have met her in the way that things happen when you have stopped arranging for things to happen. When you have put down the project of finding something and simply started living in life. Indifferent to your plans, but occasionally generous in ways that planning never produces. Delivers something you weren't looking for in a moment you weren't ready for in a form you didn't expect. She arrived like that, sideways, not through any of the doors I had been watching. What I noticed first was not anything I could have pointed to in a list. It was not a collection of qualities or a set of boxes checked. It was something more like atmosphere. The specific quality of her presence in a room, which was different from how most people occupied space. Most people occupy space outwardly. Their presence expands toward you, tries to fill the distance between, wants to be received. Hers did something different. It was self-contained in a way that made you want to move toward it, rather than feeling moved toward by it. There was a completeness to how she existed in a room that was genuinely rare and immediately interesting. I moved toward it. Not physically, not that first time, just in the interior sense. My attention moved toward her and stayed there in a way I noticed without fully understanding. We talked. Eventually we talked, and talking to her was like talking to someone who was actually listening, which sounds like a basic thing and is, in fact, almost never the thing. Most conversations are two people waiting for their turn, are performing interest while their real attention is elsewhere, are listening for the specific phrases that confirm what they already thought, rather than receiving what is actually being said. She listened the way that changes the quality of speaking, the way that makes you say truer things than you plan to say, because the attention meeting you is real enough to call the real thing out of you. I said truer things than I planned to say. I noticed myself doing it. Chose not to stop. The distance between us was not enormous, not the other side of the world, but it was enough. Enough to make every day a day we were not in the same place. Enough to mean that the conversations happened through screens and the warmth came through the screens genuinely, but incompletely, the way warmth always comes through mediation, real but reduced, present but not quite the same as the unmediated thing. You feel the light through the window, but the window is still there. I had been living with the window for long enough. The evening that broke it open was an ordinary one. That's the thing about the moments that finally crack something. They don't arrive with the significance their consequences deserve. They look exactly like all the other evenings. Same light, same room, Same general texture of a day winding down into the particular quiet of a night that has no special claim on anything. I had been sitting with something she said, not in that conversation, in a conversation days earlier, a thing she had mentioned without weight, without any indication that she expected it to land anywhere particular. One of those things that passes at the time and then surfaces later at a different depth, arriving in a different hour with different significance. The specific way she had described something ordinary, the exact words, their exact order, the particular quality of honesty in them that was so completely herself that receiving them again in memory felt almost like being with her. Almost. That almost is where the evening broke open. Almost is the wrong word for what I wanted. Almost is the word for distance. Almost is the word for a connection that is real and genuine and worth everything and is still happening through a window. I was tired of almost. I had been patient with the almost because patience seemed like the mature response. It seemed like the thing that demonstrated I was someone who understood that love is not always logistically simple and that wanting someone to be close is not the same as needing them to be close this instant. But sitting in the ordinary quiet of that ordinary evening, I understood something that the patience had been keeping me from understanding. There was no practical reason to wait. None. There was no situation resolving itself, no timing perfecting itself, no external condition moving toward a state that would make going to her more appropriate or more justified than it was right now. The wait was not in service of anything. It was just the wait. The habitual postponement of the thing I wanted, because wanting something urgently has always felt, to me, like a loss of control that needs to be managed. I was managing my own desire. That was the thing I was doing. I was treating the pull toward her as something to be regulated rather than honored, and the regulation was costing something I hadn't been counting. I opened my phone, looked at the options, not with the deliberate searching of someone making a careful decision, but with the focused attention of someone whose decision has already been made and who is now simply finding the details that will allow them to execute it. There was a way to get there by morning. It required leaving now. It required not sleeping, or sleeping briefly and badly in a position that bodies were not designed for, arriving tired and slightly disoriented in the way that moving through the night always produces. It was not the comfortable option. It was not the well-planned option. It was the option that existed right now, tonight, that closed the distance before another ordinary evening could pass with me on the wrong side of it. I booked it, put my phone down, sat for a moment with the fact of what I had just done. Then I got up and packed a bag. There's a specific quality to the packing of a bag for an unannounced trip, a different energy from the organized, checklist packing of a journey that has been planned and prepared for. This was the other kind, quick and instinctive and slightly irrational in its urgency, pulling things from drawers and shelves with the focused efficiency of a body that is already committed and is simply catching up to the commitment. I was not thinking about whether I had the right things. I was not thinking about how long I was going to be there or what I was going to need or any of the practical dimensions of the trip that a calmer version of me would have thought through. I was thinking about her. Specifically, the way you think about a person when you are moving toward them rather than away from them, when the distance is closing rather than holding steady. Different quality of thinking entirely. Not the abstract thinking that happens when someone is far away and you are maintaining the feeling across the absence. The concrete, anticipatory, almost physical thinking of someone who knows that the object of the thinking is going to be real and present and in the same room within a specific number of hours. She didn't know I was coming. I had decided not to tell her. Not for the same reason I hadn't told anyone about the last trip I took towards someone I cared about. That had been about needing the action to be mine before it became anyone else's. This was different. This was simpler. I wanted to arrive, and I wanted the arrival itself to say the thing that I wanted to say, without the message preceding it and changing its shape. I wanted her to open the door and find me standing there, and I wanted that moment, her face, her eyes, the specific thing that happens to a person's face when someone they love appears without warning, to be the sentence. All the words I could have sent in advance would have been smaller than that moment. I wanted the moment. I left the house in the late evening. The street was quiet in the way streets are quiet, when most of the world has already made its decision about where it is spending the night. I put my bag in the car and sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, not hesitating, just being present in the last few minutes of being on the wrong side of the distance before the distance started closing. The city moved past the windows as I drove. Familiar streets made unfamiliar by the hour, by the light, by the specific quality of moving through a place you know well in a direction and with a purpose that makes it all look different. Everything looks different when you're going towards something you want. The same geography, the same buildings, the same road you have driven 100 times. It all carries a different quality when the motion through it is toward rather than away or nowhere in particular. I thought about the first time I understood what she was, not what she was like. That came earlier. That came through all the conversations and the accumulating picture of a person, assembled through sustained attention. But what she was, to me, in the specific and non-transferable sense, the thing I had sat with quietly for a while before saying it even to myself, because some understandings need to be held privately before they can survive being spoken, she was the person I was most honest with. That was the simplest way I had found to say it, in a life where I learned to manage most of my interior carefully to present the version of myself most suited to whatever situation I was in, to keep the real thoughts at a slight remove from the expressed ones. With her, I didn't do that, couldn't do it, or chose not to, and at some point the distinction between couldn't and chose not to stopped being meaningful because the result was the same. With her, I just said the true thing. It arrived without the usual editing. She received it without the usual management of what to do with it. That was not a small thing. I knew how rare that was, because I knew how long I had gone without it. The road opened up as I got past the city. Night driving has its own particular quality. The reduced visual field, the contained world of headlights, and the dark beyond them, the sense of moving through something that cannot be seen in its entirety. Just the road immediately ahead, just the distance currently being closed. Everything else is dark. I drove through the dark toward her, not desperately. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I try to describe the quality of that night. It was not desperate. It was not the driven, slightly unhinged urgency of someone acting from a place of fear or need, or the anxious calculation that if they don't do this right now, they will lose something. There was no emergency. There was no crisis. Nothing was wrong. Everything was fine. I was fine. She was fine. The whole ordinary situation was fine. I was going anyway. Because fine was not the point. Fine was not what I was after. I was after something that fine is not a version of. Something that requires presence. Actual physical presence. The same room. The same air. The face that I knew through a screen but had not been close enough to in too long. I missed her. But on the soft, manageable way that missing operates when you have it under control. In the way that had finally outgrown the management. In the way that said, this is information, and the information is that you should be where she is, and you are not where she is. And every hour that continues to be true is an hour you are choosing wrong. I was done choosing wrong. The miles went onto the car one after another. The night moved around me. Some were ahead of me in a house I had been to before and missed in the specific way you miss places that have become associated with people you love. She was sleeping or waking or moving through whatever the late hours looked like for her, completely unaware that someone was covering distance in the dark, pulled by something too honest and too specific to be called anything other than what it was. Love. Just love. Old and simple and completely resistant to the sophisticated management I had tried to apply to it. I turned the radio off at some point, drove in silence. The silence felt right, full rather than empty, the kind of silence that has something in it rather than the kind that is just the absence of noise. I thought about arriving, about the door, about her face. I drove toward it. The distance kept closing. That was enough. That was everything. I arrived when the night was at its thinnest, that hour just before morning, when the dark has started to loosen its grip, but the light hasn't arrived to replace it yet, the in-between hour. The one that belongs to nobody and feels like the world briefly pausing between one version of itself and the next. I sat in the car outside her house for a few minutes, not because I was uncertain. I was past uncertain. I sat there because the arriving felt significant enough to deserve a moment of just being in it before it became the next thing, before I knocked and the door opened and the trip became something that had already happened. I wanted to be in the last few minutes of the going still, before it turned into the having arrived. The house was quiet. The street was quiet. Everything at that hour has the quality of being held gently, of not yet being required to be anything in particular. I got out of the car, walked to the door, knocked softly, the way you knock when you are aware of the hour, when you don't want to startle. Just enough sound to be heard by someone who might be near the surface of sleep, awake enough to receive it. A light came on inside, then the sound of movement, and sounds for a moment, the sounds of someone on the other side of a door deciding something. Then the door opened. She was there, sleep-warm and slightly disoriented and completely unguarded in the way that people are when they haven't yet had time to assemble themselves for the world. No performance, no preparation, just her exactly as she was, in the first unfiltered seconds of finding something unexpected on the other side of her door in the hours before morning. She looked at me for a moment without saying anything. I looked back, and in that moment, that quiet, unscripted, completely unrehearsed moment, everything I had driven through the night to say was already said, without a word. The drive itself had said it. The hour had said it. The fact of me standing there, tired and present and unwilling to be anywhere else, said it in the only language that doesn't have room for misinterpretation. I missed you. Not in the way that waits for a better time, in the way that gets in the car. She stepped back from the door without speaking, and I came inside. The house was warm, the particular warmth of a place that has been inhabited and lived in, and has absorbed the specific presence of the person who lives there. I had missed this too, the specific atmosphere of her, the way a space feels different when it belongs to someone you love. I stood in it and felt something in me that had been slightly contracted for weeks, quietly open. She made tea. Neither of us had said very much yet. We didn't need to. There is a specific kind of being together where language is not the primary thing, where presence is doing the work that words would only interrupt. We were in that. Moving around the small kitchen in the early morning, the kettle doing its slow work, the light above the stove doing what it could against the dark outside. She handed me the cup and looked at me with the specific directness she has always had. The kind that doesn't ask, "Are you okay?" in a way that wants the managed answer. The kind that simply looks and receives whatever is actually there. I told her, not a speech. Not the rehearsed version of the thing I had been carrying. Just the plain words of it, the way the true things come out when you are tired enough that the editing apparatus has stopped working. That I missed her in a way that had stopped being manageable. That the distance had started to feel like a choice I was making rather than a circumstance I was living in. That I didn't want to make that choice anymore. She listened without interrupting. The way she always listens, all the way through. Then she said, "I know, I felt it too." 4 words, 5 words. I don't remember exactly, and it doesn't matter. What mattered was the quality of them, the simple, undefended honesty of them. No performance of not having felt it. No strategic withholding to maintain some balance of need. Just the true thing, offered back with the same directness I had offered mine. She had felt it too. The distance, the missing, the specific inadequacy of through a screen, of conversations that were real and still not the real thing. We sat with the tea in the early morning for a long time, talking sometimes, quiet sometimes. The dark outside slowly became the kind of dark that is already becoming light, and then became gray, and then became the tentative early version of morning that happens before anyone has decided the day has officially started. At some point she fell asleep on the couch, with her head tilted and her cup still in her hand, and I took the cup carefully and put it on the table, and sat there watching the morning arrive through the window. I thought about the drive, the dark, the road closing mile by mile, the simple, uncomplicated rightness of moving towards something true rather than sitting still and managing the distance from it. I thought about all the evenings before this one, all the almost went, all the maybe soon, all the times the pull was there, and I redirected it into the waiting. I was done with the waiting, not because the waiting had been wrong exactly, but because it was finished, because its time had passed and this was what came after. This, her, this room, this morning. I had missed her too much to stay away. So I didn't, and now I was here, and here was exactly where everything was.